Hello, and welcome to this episode of Musically Cogitating, a podcast about the relevance and importance of living and contemporary music of all kinds, and about how that music and those similar things impact our everyday lives. I, of course, am your favorite host, Ciyadh Wells. Thank you for joining me here today on yet another podcast Wednesday. This show is going to have lots of links and things like that. So, of course, they will be in the show notes. If you are enjoying this show, please follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, subscribe on all of your other favorite podcast catchers and players, and share it with a friend, somebody you think who might enjoy this, might get a little bit of a kick out of this show. And in case you're wondering by chance which podcast player that I use Pocket Casts, which is one that you can use on iOS, so Apple and Android. A little bit of a music adjacent thing there for you, as always. Today I wanted to, of course, talk about something, because that's what I come on here and do. I come on and I cogitate to you about things that are music related, music adjacent, music side by side. And I have this deep love, especially as of late, for apps and music technologies and things like that. And so today I wanted to talk a little about the tools that I use to consume music digitally. So that includes like streaming apps and a few other things, as well as like some random apps that I just think maybe you know about, maybe you don't, but things that I've used for a really long time that I enjoy and that help me to continue to discover music that is both new and new to me. And like I said, I really love talking about these types of things, and it's not usually something I talk about, but this topic is the perfect mix of things that are like music related but just in the sweet spot for this show, this podcast, my podcast, your podcast, all the podcasts. I recently did an episode where I talked about listening to music, and it was a great one. I got a lot of really great feedback about that, which of course will be linked as well. And so I wanted to do, just a deeper dive into the tools and some of the thought that goes into how you may or may not consume your music digitally speaking. In the next few months, I'll do an episode about analog music consumption and tools, because that is also a big part of the way that I consume music. But for now, I wanted to focus on the digital, as, you're listening to me through a digital means, unless you are downloading this, burning it to a CD, putting it in your CD player. And if you are, please let me know, because I want to be your friend. But, you're probably streaming this, and so you have some familiarity with digital music and consuming things digitally, like TV, podcasts, movies, books even. And so, I want to talk about it from the standpoint of someone who consumes a lot of music in general, consumes a lot of music generally digitally, and someone who is also a musician, so someone who makes music and creates music and all of that stuff. Let's talk about streaming. So like I said, if you are listening to this, you're probably streaming this, which is super awesome. But I was really inspired to do my own take on this particular topic after listening to an episode of one of my favorite technology app podcasts that I listen to called MacStories, and they have an accompanying and companion blog called MacStories, and they did a few episodes about music and things like that. And so it really kind of began to light this fire in me again, which has been really awesome, especially because now I have more time to be thinking about these things, and it's a lot of fun and it's really interesting. And at heart, I am kind of a tinkerer, so I like to tinker with apps and settings and things like that. And so it was just like, I think that maybe you'll find this interesting, because I'm not sure that many people have given much thought to it, and it's fine if you haven't. It's not a bad thing by any means, but it's just, I'm here to give you a perspective that it is something that you can have more control over, and it's something that you can, if you would like, you can put a little bit more thought into. Streaming is how we consume a lot of our media, and I remember being a child, and I remember Napster, and I remember LimeWire, and downloading those tracks and those files. And I remember there used to be a CD man who would come around, and he would give you the CDs, and you would have to find somewhere to play them, and then you would rip them to your computer. And it was just all of this like really cool music technology. But we've come so far, and for musicians, the music, how we consume it now, streaming has become the easiest way for us to connect with people. It's become the way that we can consume and enjoy our music, but we're all kind of aware that it's not really a viable way for people to continue to support musicians, but it's also not a viable way for artists to really make a living. There's just not a lot of money in it unless you are big, the Beyoncés and Taylor Swifts of the world. I think they say that musicians on average make like 1/10 of a cent per stream. So it's not how musicians make money, but it's kind of a necessity in our culture. There will be a future podcast episode about how to support musicians, but for now we are talking about apps and music and technology. And you can still buy digital music and download it and put it on your device, and so that is of course better. That is a more direct way to support musicians. But for a lot of us, we do pay sort of a monthly subscription fee, and that is our way of kind of giving some support to artists, and it's our way of getting ad-free music listening or any kind of other perks that they might offer. And I'm not going to make assumptions about which services you use, but I'm going to talk about some of the ones that are bigger, the ones that I use, and maybe the ones that I'm going to start kind of experimenting with, because I'm interested in broadening my reach and my horizons, my discovery beyond what it currently is. And so the streaming services that I currently use are Apple Music and Spotify, but there's also Deezer, which is another cool one, and Tidal, and several others. I have a subscription to Apple Music and Spotify. Shout out to student discounts. But popular to contrary belief, they are not the same fundamentally. I mean, maybe they are the same fundamentally, but they're not really exactly the same. They're very similar. They have features and traits that carry across from one to the other, but they're definitely not the same. And Apple Music is a more recent addition to my digital music consumption. I like the desktop application a lot, although I don't know that there is really a good desktop streaming app out there. Of course, I'm thinking I'm bought into the Apple ecosystem, so I'm thinking about my MacBook. But even if you're on Windows, I don't think that there's a great one, although Spotify is pretty good. But most people aren't listening to music that way. I think we're mostly doing it on our mobile devices, so tablets and phones. But that is kind of how I feel about the desktop applications on for each of those. But I do like the one on Apple Music, and there's one thing that I find that's easier on Apple Music, although this is highly contested, is that the metadata. So like maybe who the performer is on the track, or who produced it or recorded it, or where, or who composed it, is much easier to find. And some people say that this is better on Spotify. I've found it to be better on Apple Music. And it is kind of important for me because let's say I want to listen to this piece by Bach, and there could be easily 1,000 recordings of the piece. And so if I go to search it, I'm just gonna, like, in some of them it will just come up with Bach. Like, it won't come up with like the different instrument or when it was recorded, or the ensemble that recorded it, or the performer or the arranger, or any of that. But I've found that a little bit easier to identify and find in Apple Music. Again, that's just me, and maybe I'm sure this also has something to do with like searching. So the better you are at figuring out exactly how you want to search and find something, probably the better results you're going to get. But this is just a distinction from me that I've noticed, and something that can be really important to me if I am trying to find a different interpretation of a piece, just for a comparison and a contrast or something like that. Also, it's like metadata is also like liner notes. So like I said, who wrote it, who composed it, where it was produced, when it was produced, lyrics, and all of those things. I think that Spotify is way more known for the playlists, and I won't get into playlists again because I've did that, and I have come to accept that we live in a playlist culture, and that's just how it's going to be. So I really need to get over that, and I need to surrender to that. But playlists are good on Spotify, and I'm not going to lie. Like, every once in a while I'll roll down my windows. I don't like, I hate driving in the car with the windows down, but theoretically I will roll down the windows and I will go to my Spotify and I will pick a playlist because I just know that it's going to be good and I like it. And for musicians, getting on a Spotify playlist can be a really big boost in your visibility, which is important for your career. You do music because you enjoy it, but you do music and you want to make it a career so that you can sustain yourself. And so that visibility that comes from a Spotify playlist can be really important. Of course, Apple Music does have playlists, but it doesn't have the same feel, or it doesn't have the same clout that the ones do on Spotify. And on Spotify, that's people's jobs, right? There are people who are playlist curators, and they get thousands of emails a day from artists like me and like you who are wanting to be on a playlist because it has become the way that people come to find music, because they're updated every Friday. At least some of the ones that I listen to are. And so it's like, oh, I know that on Friday I can hear some new music, and that's really important. And the way that music is organized in the apps, I think, is kind of different as well. I was looking up a single from a new album, and in Apple Music, I could see the entire album, but just without the songs that were already out, kind of grayed out, and you couldn't download them. But on Spotify, there wasn't the rest of the album. There were just the singles. And so it was a weird way, but it was definitely something that I have noticed. And maybe you might not notice it because you probably don't care. And you're like, Ciyadh, why do you spend so much time thinking about this? And the answer is, I don't know. But, this is where we are. And so we're going to go with it. All right. Okay. Good day. Now, like I said, I have only come to use Apple Music in probably the last 6 months or so because I didn't want to switch. Do you ever think about if you're using an app or just anything in life in general, there is often a switching cost to something that can be pretty high, and then you have to learn how to use it. And then if there is data, playlists, or songs or anything, you have to do it all over again, and sometimes you just don't want to do that. But I was like, okay, it's fine, I can use this little student discount for right now because I am still a student, and I got Apple Music. And I don't know, I think at some point I'll probably do away with one of them because I will start to purchase a lot more music as far as like downloading music, but also analog. But for now, I'm gonna continue to work with both of them and see what I like. And I think it's good to, if you are able to, support the artists and their music more directly, of course, but then also indirectly through things like this, although they're only making like 1/10 of a penny or something like that. I will say that, of course, not of course, maybe, but you may or may not have noticed, but there seems to be a little bit more editorial content on Apple Music. So there's like the radio, and they're integrating parts of Apple Music with Apple News. So there's like more written stuff about the music, which I personally enjoy. I like to read about the music that I'm listening to, which might be a little weird, but it is something that I like. So it's whatever you kind of floats your boat. But I do really enjoy, going on to Apple Music and seeing all that they have to say about an artist, like the biography and stuff. Of course, there is that in Spotify, but I don't know. I like the way it looks better in Apple Music. But again, Spotify is still good. As far as how the apps recommend new music to me, I think they're kind of the same, where based on the artists that you followed or liked within each of the apps, once a week, I think it's usually on Fridays or Saturdays, they will put together a quote unquote personalized curated playlist. It's just an algorithm kind of thing, but they'll put together a playlist of music that is similar, and it's like your new released radar or something like that, they call it in Spotify. And those are cool. I think it's how a lot of people come to know new music and new music that is new to them. And I think if you like it, it's great. I don't always listen to those playlists just because I don't. Usually I have an idea of what I want to listen to, and then from there I can discover and poke around and find something new. But a lot of people really like it, and they say the one on Spotify is pretty good. So I also think that you're going to get more out of it the more you put into it. So if you're a person who is really like me, who is really, really diligent about rating, liking, adding music to playlists, using the app, listening to those playlists a lot, then you're probably going to get a more personalized set of recommendations for you more often. Like I said, these aren't the only ones out there. There's Pandora, but that's kind of, Pandora is still more like radio. I think people really enjoy it, but it's not so personalized. I mean, there are the stations and stuff like that, but it's not like individual songs. There is Deezer, which is cool, and I've looked into it, and it probably rests on top of like the same distribution that Apple or Spotify get, but it's in a different app. It's a little bit closer to Spotify, which is pretty cool. It's neat, and I like the recommendations that are on it. Concertino is another one, and ding ding ding, we finally got to it. It's specific to classical music, and it's pretty good in terms of the data that it shows, or the editorial content that it shows about the music and about the composers, which, you know, can sometimes be really important, or it can just help provide a lot of context. And I think generally in all kinds of music, we could do a better job of acknowledging, celebrating the people who were, you know, quote unquote, behind the scenes or behind the music or whatever. But in Concertino, the radio stations are pretty good, and it's free. It is still in development, so, you know, when I looked up guitar, I didn't find all the results that I would have, you know, in some other apps, but it was okay. It was cool, and I like that there are lots of different options for us for how we want to consume different things. If you want a classical music recommendation that is more fully formed, then I would definitely check out Primephonic. And they are already ahead of Apple Music and Spotify in that they offer high resolution or hi-fi streaming, and it's classical music only. And again, there's lots of editorial content, and there's lots of curated by human playlists that are really awesome, and they have a really interesting ethos about why they do things the way that they do, as far as how they pay artists and how that works out for streaming. Because in classical music, you might have a piece that has been played by 80 people that spans over 10 tracks, and it's one piece, whereas in other kinds of music it's not always that way. And so, you know, how do you compensate people for that? Who gets compensated, you know? And so there are some unique things in classical music that I think we still have to figure out, and Primephonic is probably on the way to figuring that out. And so I'm going to continue to check out that app. It's new to me from, again, another source of recommendations, but it was really cool, and they have a 2-week trial, so I would check it out if I were you, if you're really into classical music and you're looking for something new and fresh. And their little widget for iPhone is really awesome as well. Tidal is another one. I have not used Tidal, but they have had, you know, the different levels of streaming, so hi-fi and lossless and high resolution streaming for a long time. I know you can pay more for it. And so if you're into that, which I'm getting into that, I would say it's probably a good route to go. I'm going to test it out at some point, and whenever I do, of course, I will report back, because that is what I do. And they say that the metadata on this is really good, so I'll see. And of course, I am to be the judge of that. So those are just a few of the things that I'm thinking about when it comes to, you know, how I stream music, the apps and services that I use, why I might choose to pay a subscription and why I might not, and how I envision that to look in the future. Of course, you know, we all understand and acknowledge that not everyone is in a position of privilege to be able to pay monthly for a subscription. And so you can use a lot of these services for free in some way. You might have to listen to ads or something like that, but it's still available. And YouTube is also a great free way to consume music. And there's YouTube Music, but I have never really considered that to be an option, although I'm sure there are people out there who do. So there's that. But you as the consumer, as the listener, you do have a choice and a decision about how you consume your music. And I just think that's something that I want to get across, and it's interesting. So that's that about streaming. Now I want to get into some even more adjacent kinds of apps that I use that kind of help me or assist me or make it more fun to stream music digitally, because that is cool. So I'm going to talk about the other apps in 3 different categories: discovery, players, and random. So discovery, continuing to discover new music and music that is new to me is really, really important. And I say new to me, of course, because not all music that is new to me is actually new. I'm often discovering things that have been recorded many, many years ago, but they're new to me. And so I need a way for myself to continue to be discovering those things and to be keeping up. And so Music Harbor is so good for this. And it's an app where you can import your liked artists and their data from Apple Music and Spotify, which is awesome. And then you follow them in the app, or it follows them for you. And then it can send you a notification when they've come out with something new. So it kind of helps you to keep up with the people that you already like. But, if that person is doing a feature on another record or something like that, then it helps you to kind of discover new people. And like I said, Apple Music and Spotify, they can do this within the app with like those weekly playlist recommendations, but I think they kind of fall short, generally speaking, on this topic, because their focus isn't what Music Harbor's focus is, which is to show you what your favorite artists are doing. And that's what Music Harbor does. And you can even sync that up with your calendar. So if there's something, if Beyonce is going to put out an album and she's actually going to announce when it is coming out, then, I can put it in my calendar if you're one of those people like I am. And I can say, okay, I want to make sure that I'm listening to this, or I want to make sure that I've bought it or downloaded it or whatever. I found that before using this app, I never was really aware of when someone was coming out with something new, because you can't follow all these people on social media. So this just really helps to keep up with those people that you already know and love and discover their new music, but also, the people who they're collaborating with and things like that. So I would highly recommend it. Beeper is another app, and you can import artists from other apps, but you can individually follow artists within the app, and it's pretty cool to just see a list of like random people and to be interested in them, and you can learn, and they have their bios and latest releases and stuff like that. So I like that. It's a little bit of a different take on discovery, but it's still cool. I think another app called MusicSmart, which may or may not be from the same developer as Music Harbor, is an app that does let you see the metadata for any song that you use on Apple Music. So it doesn't work with Spotify, boo, but it works with Apple Music, which is pretty cool. So anytime that you click on a track, you can go inside the MusicSmart app and it will tell you all of those things, like the year that it came out, the date of the release, who composed it, who recorded it, the producers, and all of that. So that helps me to discover new things about an artist or about the producers. It's really interesting to see those little connections between the various artists and all of that. So I really, really love that. Bandsintown is similar to Music Harbor, but just for concerts and shows. So you can import your artists from Facebook, or you can just like them in the app. And then when they're in your area, I think the area that I have set is like 150-mile radius, because I will definitely drive 2.5 hours for a concert for somebody I really like. And they'll just send you a notification when they announce a new concert, but also like when their tickets go on sale and you can see the seating and all of that. And it's an app that I've used for a really, really long time, and I enjoy it so much. And there's also a new thing that they came out with called Plus, which is new from the kind of pandemic era where a lot of things have been live streamed, but you can subscribe to it to see live streamed concerts. And so I've looked at it a little bit, and it's been mostly artists that I've never heard of. So it's a really great discovery tool if you're just looking for something new, because I think that we like the artists that we like for a reason. And so it can be really easy for us to get in the habit of only listening to things that we know. But I think that it's good for us to get into the habit of going to something new, listening to something new, trying new things. And so it's something that I've really enjoyed over this time. Of course, there's still things like Shazam and Soundhound that really help with discovery. Like if you're in a restaurant and you hear a song and you're like, what is this song? Then they can tell you. And those are still around. So that's really, really cool. Now, there are players out there which are different than just using the Spotify or just using the Apple Music app or Deezer or Primephonic or whatever. And these are like little companion apps that help you to interact with your music library, but in a little bit of a different way, and sometimes in a nicer way, because these apps are kind of better because that's what they're designed for. And so it's really interesting. Albums is the first one, and their headline is Albums, Not Algorithms. And so the point and the focus of this app is for you to just focus on listening to albums. And so in this app, there are no playlists, they're just albums. And so what it does is it takes the albums that you've saved to your library in Apple Music, and it just lets you play them. And guess what? There is no skipping or shuffle. So we all know how I feel about this. So in albums, you just pick the album and you go, and it's really nice, and it takes away a lot of the clutter, and it really helps you to just focus on the music, which is really, really fun. Because I know inside of Spotify and Apple Music and all these other streaming apps, I'll start playing a song, but then I'll be like, ooh, there's a button here, and then I'll just keep going and going, and I'm not even paying attention. So albums really takes a lot of that clutter away and just helps you focus on what's right in front of you. Longplay is another app that is similar. You can import music and albums that you already own to this one. So albums is based on what's in your streaming library, but Longplay is based on things that you might just have like the MP3s for already. So it's really cool. Doppler is an app that can play many different formats of audio that you own. So not just MP3 or waves, but lossless and FLAC and all of that. So if you know what that means, you know what it means. And it's an app that can do all of that. One that I've recently started to use a little more is called Soor. And it's just another app that's really similar to Apple Music. It does cost, but it is really pretty to look at, and it's easier to kind of use than Apple Music, which is a very strange thing to say, but I like it. And the widgets are really, really, really beautiful. And as someone who likes widgets, the little things you can put on your home screen on your phone, I am like, just totally head over heels for this. I said there would be a third category here called random. And these two apps are kind of similar, but they're super random, and I wanted to mention them because they're fun, because that's what this is about, and why not? So Last.fm is a way for you to keep up with your streaming stats, and is also a music player. So you can stream music from within the Last.fm app because it connects to one of your streaming subscriptions, like Spotify is the one I have it connected to. But you can keep track of what's called your scrubbles, which is any time that you stream a particular song, that's like one scrubble. So it's like one listen, and it can keep track of that data for you, and it can give you recommendations based off of that. And so if you're a person who's into knowing how often you've listened to that same sad song, then this is probably the perfect app for you. The last one that I'm going to mention in particular is called Spotistats, which I think is just the cutest name for an app, Spotistats. But if you are familiar with the very ubiquitous social media trend that happens at the last week of every December, or maybe it starts like at the beginning of December, but it is when social media Instagram stories are just filled with people's Spotify Wrapped stats, and it tells you like how long they listen to a song or who they listen to the most. And I remember last year, because we were all at home, it was just like, oh, I'm tired of seeing this. And then the people who have only Apple Music, they get a little, like, oh, well, we don't have Spotify. And so it just becomes a whole thing. But Spotistats is a way for you to keep up with all of that stuff all year round. So, it is now May. And if you're curious about what you've been listening to for the past 4 months, then you can go on Spotistats and it can tell you, and it gives you like a really in-depth breakdown of all of that. These are, of course, I've talked about a lot of apps and a lot of different technologies and the way that I interact them and use them. And they're not all of them. Of course, there are other ones called like Soundhound, which is like Shazam. So listening to a song and telling you what it is. Songkick is really similar to Bandsintown, but I wouldn't say they're the same. They're similar, and probably if you're like me and you really care about these things, and probably using both of them is gonna give you the really wide net that you want. 8 Tracks is a website. I think they have an app too, but I know it's a website, and it's just playlists. There's Bandcamp, there is Marvis Pro, which is really similar to Soor. There is Meta, which is a desktop app which shows you like metadata that you can alter and stuff like that if you import CDs, which I, of course, still do to my Mac here. So these are just some extras for you. And like I said, everything that I have mentioned is linked in the show notes. So go give it a try and let me know what you think. I'm also going to include some screenshots of my phone screen so that you can see the pages on my phone that I have dedicated to all the music apps and kind of how I think about it and interact with them, because it's cool and why not? So the point of this episode wasn't to persuade you to spend more money on apps. You totally can, and it's really not necessary, and it's only something that even until recently I was one of those people. I was like, I'm not spending money on an app, and now if it's $1 or $2, I'm like, okay, I might spend money on this, but it's definitely not something that I think you need to do. A lot of these services are completely free, and they just kind of help me keep up. And there are even more out there. So I encourage you to just have fun with it and not to think too much, and to tinker and to have fun with technology and with how we enjoy and consume our music. A lot of how I consume these things is based on feel and on need, and do I want to listen to an album or a song or a playlist, or do I want to dig and do I want to search and do I want to find something? And so it's just fun to think about, and I am grateful that you all let me kind of talk about this thing on my show, which is fun to me. I love technology, or this kind of technology anyway, and so it's just fun to be able to share and all of that. Since this is a show about music, I wanted to recommend something for you to listen to, and this week I'm going to recommend Survivor by Destiny's Child, the song and the album, because yes, there are differences there. And I was reading one of my music blogs yesterday, and it said that Survivor was 20 years old. And I was like, what? Oh my gosh. I remember, being a wee little Ciyadh, and I remember getting that CD, and I still have that CD. Of course I do. And it's all scratchy. So of course I have a second copy, but it's just like 20 years of that album, and it has aged so well, and I just love it. So please do me a favor, take out your streaming app, put on albums, the app that I was telling you about, and just sit and listen to Survivor, the song and the album, and let it sink in with you. Like, Destiny's Child, 20 years. This is amazing. It's amazing. Don't forget to follow the podcast on social media and on the website. And people, you have got to get your Musically Cogitating podcast sticker and bookmark set. And you can do that in the link that's says Musically Cogitating podcast sticker and bookmark set. It's available on the Buy Me a Coffee. And the stickers are awesome, and I really like them, and I hope that you like them too. And it's fun to have like a little piece of merchandise in the world. So I love it. Again, like I said, if you could, I really appreciate it if you would leave us a review, if you could follow the show, and all of that. So I think that I have talked enough today about apps and technology and about music. I would love to know if you use any of these apps, if you've put any thought into this. I know I'm talking to you for however long it's been, and I've put a lot of thought into this, and a lot of other people do too. I am not the only one, I promise. So you are not alone if this is you. And if you have questions or just want me to clarify something, let me know. You can send me a DM, you can send me an email, or anything like that. So that's all I have for you today. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of the Musically Cogitating podcast. Until then, bye-bye.